What's up guys, this is Jeff from Sorta Healthy, and today we'll be talking about going off on your own as a personal trainer. And no, in this video we won't be discussing how you, a personal trainer, can quit your job and travel across the country on a whimsical adventure, as fun as that may be. This video will be useful for the personal trainer who works for somebody else, whether it's in a gym or a fitness facility, and wants to work for themselves. How do you manage that transition? What sort of things do you have to be careful of? And what are your options going forward? These are all things that we'll be discussing today. Before we get too far into the weeds today, all I ask is that you consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you have not done so already. This helps the channel to grow, which does allow me to make more free content for all of you. Thank you very much for the support, everyone. The channel is growing, and it is thanks to all of you. Back to today's topic, going off on your own as a personal trainer. So I'm assuming that most of you guys still watching this video are either currently employed in a gym or fitness facility or will be very soon. When we're talking about transitioning out of one of these facilities to working on your own, if you're an independent contractor, taking your clients with you when you transition is a very simple process. You don't technically work for that facility that you're leaving, you technically work for yourself if you're working as an independent contractor. So as an independent contractor, you're gonna have an advantage transitioning to any of the options that we're soon gonna be talking about in this video. If you're looking to make that same transition as an employee working in a gym or a fitness facility, that transition could still be easy, but it also might not be. The main reason that it's not as easy for employees to go off on their own is primarily because of non-compete agreements. A typical non-compete agreement in the personal training world might look a little something like this. I blank agreed to not do any sort of personal training with any client within a 10-mile radius of Jeff's Cool Studio. The only clients that I will train within this 10-mile radius will be Jeff's Cool Studio clients, and I agreed to only train them as an employee of this facility. I agreed to not train anyone else in this 10-mile radius while I am employed by Jeff's Cool Studio. I also agreed to not train anyone in this radius until at least 365 days have passed after resignation or termination. If I breach this agreement, I agreed to pay for any damages done to Jeff's Cool Studio. Now obviously a real non-compete agreement would have more legal speak in it, and because of that it would be a lot more confusing. What this incredibly fake non-compete is requesting is that while working at Jeff's Cool Studio, you can't do any other training with clients within a 10-mile radius of the studio except the training that you're doing within the studio as an employee. That means if I got offered a training job 7.2 miles away from Jeff's Cool Studio and I took it, I would be breaching that contract. I also agreed to not train or take any clients from Jeff's Cool Studio and train them anywhere other than the studio while I'm employed there, or even up to 365 days after termination or resignation. These things do sound fairly extreme, but they're actually pretty standard within non-compete agreements. Trainers sign these kind of things all the time, and sometimes they're aware of what they're signing, and sometimes they have no idea. I often hear of trainers in person or see trainers writing online that they're going to leave their current gym job and take all of their current clients with them to a new location. It's pretty rare for me to see these same trainers acknowledge a non-compete agreement. So they either haven't signed one, which is possible, but unlikely if they were working at a facility where they were a personal trainer working as an employee, or they've signed that non-compete agreement and they're just not aware that they signed it. Every situation is different, but oftentimes there are legal and ethical reasons to not steal clients from one location and bring them to a new location. Legally, sometimes these non-compete agreements don't hold up in court, and oftentimes your previous employer just might not feel like it's worth it to come after you for taking some clients. Sometimes these agreements do hold up in court though, and sometimes if enough financial damage is done, aka you taking a whole bunch of clients from your employer, well, that employer might decide to come after you in court. Again, I do want to reiterate that every situation with a personal trainer and their clients is different. I just don't want you guys to take clients from a gym or a large corporation and get sued. So for legal reasons and ethical reasons as well, be smart out there. As a small business owner, and honestly as a personal trainer working anywhere, you're kind of a small business owner running your own little thing. Your reputation is always on the line, so try not to burn any bridges. Anyways, that's my rant on non-compete agreements. I feel like I had to touch that subject a little bit more because for whatever reason, no one else talks about it in the personal training world. Let's move on to the fun stuff though. Let's talk about what options you can take when transitioning into working for yourself as a personal trainer. And then after we break down those different options, let's talk a little bit more about the transition process for each one of those options as well. We are kicking it off with online coaching. So one big pro of online coaching is that it's less affected by non-compete agreements. I can honestly say in all my years of personal training, I've never seen a non-compete agreement that actually prohibited doing online training with clients. The pro of online training is always the fact that you're not trading as much time for money, so that one's pretty obvious. If you're doing online coaching right, you're just not spending anywhere near as much time face-to-face with your client. Another big pro is that you can do it from home. That's always nice. This is especially true in years like 2020. You guys know what I'm talking about. And then we have some cons. It's harder to transition in-person clients to online coaching. I wouldn't say this is always true, but it's definitely true a lot of the time. And I think it's because online coaching clients are just inherently different than in-person training clients. They are two different demographics, and sometimes your in-person training clients just won't see the value in online coaching. And I think that goes hand in hand with the next con, which it's very different than in-person training. Again, it being different isn't necessarily a big con, but the fact that it's very different makes it tougher to transition in-person training clients to online coaching clients. Not always true, but true a lot of the time. The next option we'll talk about is virtual personal training. Virtual personal training is just like one-on-one personal training, but via webcam. Another pro is that it's less affected by non-competes. If you're training someone via webcam in a totally different area, in a way you're kind of not training them locally, so definitely it's tough to say whether or not a non-compete would affect virtual personal training at all. This doesn't mean it's ethically always right to take clients and train them virtually, but again, non-competes are less of an issue for virtual personal training. This is just a fact. Virtual personal training is very similar to in-person training. I'd say for your clients who are focused on weight loss or just improving their general health, you can pretty much do the same workout virtually that you would do in person. Minus a little bit of the equipment, but if you're skilled as a trainer, that probably won't make a huge difference. Just like with online coaching, you can do it from home, and that is always a perk, especially with the future of certain gyms and fitness facilities looking a little bit questionable. Now to the cons, you're still trading lots of time for money, just like you would be for in-person personal training. And some do view it as less valuable than in-person personal training. And that's probably because you're not there in person working with them. Maybe they have a little bit less equipment to work with. Whatever the case may be, some people do view it as less valuable than in-person personal training. Now we're going to talk about in-home personal training, or training clients inside of their own homes. One of the big pros is that you can do it all locally. Another pro is that the overhead is very low. You just need to pay for some equipment, usually some bands, some light dumbbells. Of course, you do need a car, and you do have to pay for gas traveling between clients. But yeah, overhead is still very low. I think it's fair to say that it's similar to other types of in-person personal training. In fact, I would view this as a higher end option for personal trainers, because if you're clever as a personal trainer, you can really give a very good in-home workout. The biggest con here is time. It takes a lot more time to do these sessions. Obviously, you have the session time itself, but then you also have travel time to take into account as well. To put this in perspective, if I could do 8 personal training sessions in a regular day, if I'm doing in-home personal training, I'm probably only going to get 4 or 5 done in that same period of time. Because it takes up more of your time, you'll have to charge more. That's kind of always a downside, because you want your prices to be as competitive as possible. Another con here would be non-compete agreements, because again, we are talking about trainers that are looking to transition onto their own. If you've signed a non-compete agreement working in a gym or a facility, it will most definitely apply to any local in-home personal training as well. Our next option when going off on your own as a personal trainer is to become an in-person independent contractor trainer. Most often in this situation, a personal trainer may rent space at a fitness facility or a gym. Technically, they are not employed by this facility. However, they do train people there, and they do rent equipment and or a space. On to the pros, you can definitely do some very high quality in-person training here. Assuming that you're renting space at a decent facility, it should be very similar to the training that you were doing at the space that you're transitioning out of. Another pro is low-ish overhead. And when I say low-ish overhead, your overhead is typically not going to be very high in these types of situations. Sometimes it can be, but typically you're just going to be paying a relatively small monthly fee or a percentage of your training sessions. It's also a very easy transition most of the time into these spaces. And again, that's because the type of training you're doing in these spaces as an independent contractor should be pretty much indistinguishable from training that's more typical in a more traditional gym setting. I think because of this, this is likely the most common transition that a lot of trainers will make when they want to go working on their own. On to the cons. It absolutely breaks a non-compete agreement. I mean, if you're an employee at a gym and you quit that gym and then bring all of your clients over to a rental space that's nearby, it looks pretty bad, honestly. As always, I want to reiterate that every situation is different. Obviously, there are lots of gyms that take advantage of their trainers. My advice to trainers who are transitioning onto doing their own thing is to always take the high road, but of course that is up for you guys to decide. And also, yeah, don't get sued. Getting sued is bad. Moving on. I think another con here is still the overhead. Of course, it is on the lower side, but it's not like it's non-existent. You are going to have to pay rent monthly, or you're going to have to pay a percentage of your sessions, or there'll be some other form of payment. But yeah, you're still gonna have overhead, so be ready for that. The final option here is running your own training facility. On to the pros. You have the greatest possibility for expansion here, and I think that's pretty obvious because this is your business. You're the boss. You can pretty much do whatever you want. You can start up multiple locations. You can hire a whole bunch of other trainers to work for you. The possibilities are endless. Another pro is you have the highest possible quality for in-person training. I feel like this is true because now you have total control over equipment, the layout of the facility, and just about everything else. Obviously, as a legit business owner, you do get more respect from clients. On to the cons. Obviously, the overhead is way higher typically. It's also a heck of a lot more work. You have to do marketing, you have to do just a little bit of everything in the beginning. And back to that non-compete, it still most definitely applies here. If you have a non-compete with a local gym or fitness facility, it doesn't mean you'd be safe from any contract that you signed. So now that we've broken down the ways in which you could transition to working for yourself after working for a gym or a fitness facility, let's discuss the transition process itself a little bit more. I don't know about you guys, but when I went through this process myself, I knew that there was no way that I would be able to quit my current training job and just move right into doing my own thing. I had a mortgage, car, food, utilities, phone, a whole bunch of other bills that I had to pay for. So pretty much there was no way that I could pay for all of those things if I quit my previous training job. Because as we all know, when you're starting a new personal training position, things usually start off a little bit slower. Because I couldn't afford to quit this other training job, which most of you guys watching this video will be in the same position that I was in, I had to start my own training business while still working on that other job at the same time. So from there, it kind of became a balancing act. I had to slowly shift time and hours away from my previous training job to my new training job, the one that I had created for myself. And I had to do that slowly so I didn't lose too much income at any one given time. This process took me about 1.5 years to accomplish, or I should say 1.5 years to fully transition from that old training job where I worked for someone else to working for myself. And it was a damn challenging 1.5 years, but it was definitely worth it. The transition process will probably be a little bit different for you depending on which of those 5 options that you'll be going for. For online personal training or virtual personal training, you'll probably find most of your clients through social media, especially Instagram. You should really focus on increasing your presence on Instagram and Facebook. You need to figure out who your ideal client is for both of these 2 types of training and figure out a consistent posting schedule that will help you attract these clients. We made a full video on this process, so make sure to check out this video here if you're in this situation. For the other 3 options, which are all in person, you really should have a website and one that ranks well for personal training wherever you'll be setting up shop. Basically, if you're going to be doing in-home personal training in Southington, Connecticut, you need to find a way to rank for that on Google. You should still post consistently on Instagram and Facebook and target your ideal client with consistent, well thought out posts. But less of your clients will probably come from this. More of your clients in person will probably come from word of mouth, local Facebook groups, and Google once your website has been keyworded properly and has existed on Google for a little while. I break this stuff down in much greater detail in this video right here, so make sure to check this video out if this kind of stuff sounds like the direction that you want to go in. Ultimately, none of these options are perfect, and none of them are really that easy. Going off on your own is always pretty hard, and there are certainly a lot of pros and cons to working for yourself. Personally, I love it for the freedom, and it is hard for me to imagine myself doing anything else. One cool thing to think about here too is that you don't only have to do one option. I started out by training people in their own houses. As the years have passed and my business has expanded, the only kind of personal training that I don't do now is training people in their houses. I just don't have as much free time these days, and training people in their houses does take up a lot of time. Your career in this field will change and evolve over time, just like mine did. So keep pushing forward and keep evolving. And that's all we have for today, guys. Do you have any questions on anything that we talked about in today's video? Do you have a topic that you'd like to see in the next personal training education video? Don't forget to let me know down in the comments. If you haven't liked the video or subscribed to the channel yet, please consider doing so because it does help the channel to grow, which does allow me to make more free content for all of you. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope to see you in the next video.